right, let's start that discussion on State of the Nation. We'd like to hear your views at Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Daybreak one more time, starting from my farthest right. Let me introduce my guest. His Excellency Kimani Wamatangi is here, Kiambu Governor. Thank you for making time. Dr. Kuro Court, Party Leader, Third Way Alliance. Asante sana for making time.
Thanks, Trevor.
With John Mbadi, ODM Chair, and also nominated Member of Parliament. Thank you for making time. So let's take a look at the Daily Nation front page. You start with Inside Ruto's many battles. Man on a mission. 8 months after taking office, President William Ruto has encountered a myriad of hurdles, many of which have forced him to shift positions on campaign promises he made, hurting his supporters and serving as fodder for his rivals. Will he surmount them and complete his mission? Before we get into the nitty-gritties, Dr. Kota, I'll start with you. What is your assessment of the state of the nation today?
Things are horrible, and I'll be honest with you. I will not use even any macro level analysis to understand the state of the nation. I look at the micro, when the way people are asking for basics. I mean, I get, I'm sure Oshimeye can also confirm, I get requests that please need to me 150, need to me 200 bob, mtoto ajaenda shule, this and that. Those are the best. That just tells you, we've never been to this kind of situation. By the time somebody is asking you, my kid slept angry yesterday, I just need 150. You know, for some of us who live in this city, you actually begin to calculate. So if I send this person 150 Kenya shillings, what kind of food are they going to actually buy? And what does that really mean? So for me, from that perspective, just from an individualistic perspective, things are very bad. If you go to, say, the middle class in this country, there are times, Trevor, we used to pay school fees with just one check. You know, now you have to jipanga. You have to think about, if I pay school fees with one check, will I be able to meet the cost of my insurance, car insurance, health insurance, my shopping? I mean, the other day, actually, I mean, at the risk of confessing, I hope my wife is not watching this show.
but she will be told. Yes.
She went shopping and she went with my credit card, and I was like, what? I'm getting those alerts. So we've never shopped like this before. And this is us. So, to be honest, to just sum it up, even before we go to the nitty-gritties, I think Kenyans are really struggling. But I will also say, at the risk of sounding very critical to the president and his administration, you know, these are not newcomers in government. President William Ruto has been in government since 1992, from YK 92 all through. He's been minister, has been a deputy president for 10 years. One of the things that I think William Ruto and Gachagua could do is to be honest with Kenyans. If they cannot abandon the many lies they are telling Kenyans about fixing things, at least reduce them, so that now Kenyans are able to know, okay, this is the state of the nation we are dealing with, and this is the plan we are going to put into place to address some of these issues. But continued misleading, lying, and I watched his interview the other day, he was struggling to answer questions. And really, if you had the plan for the country for the last 10 years, you should not be struggling with some of these things. But for me, at the very least, give us a status report. It's no longer tenable to keep on blaming the Uhuru administration. Uhuru administration went, and it will not come back again. And if I were to draw parallels with any other administration in the past, President Mwai Kibaki, may God rest his soul, you know, internal peace, inherited probably a worse economy than this administration, comparatively. Comparatively. But he never dwelt on blaming the Moi regime and this and that. This administration keeps on blaming the Uhuru regime. I think they need to stop that and need to tell us exactly this is what we are dealing with and this is the plan that we have. Now we are even beginning to question the plan. Was there even actually the plan in the first instance? My submission is there wasn't a plan. We no longer don't hear about wheelbarrow. We no longer don't hear about Mama Mboga. We no longer, we can see people already with jobs, like Akina Nurdin Haji, are being lined up for newer jobs when many hustlers are still struggling with jobs. So the state of this nation is like from here to Timbuktu. I don't know whether we can exhaust
All right.
it.
We'll get into the nitty-gritties in just a bit. But Buddy, what is your assessment? Are we heading in the right direction?
I'm not surprised. You see, when Ruto formed this cabinet, if you remember what I said in Parliament, I said there's no need of wasting time. Let's give Ruto a skunk. And what I meant was simply, I noticed that what Ruto did was to make himself the minister of all the ministries. or the cabinet secretary in the 22 ministers. And as an individual, it is practically impossible. You can't work alone. You can't run a government single-handedly. It is impossible. So where he got it wrong was setting up a cabinet that could not function, a cabinet that could not perform, a cabinet full of people who probably supported his quest. There's nothing wrong with giving people who support your quest for leadership, but look for quality. Kibaki did it, and Kibaki had limited space. Kibaki had only had to appoint ministers from parliament. He had no leeway or space that now Ruto or any other president has, where you can go even to the private sector, go to the experienced people in government, people who understand the workings and functions of government. So I am not surprised. But I want to mention something, Trevor. You see, in every election or any continuing government, they will always deal with an issue. There is always a problem. There is always a challenge to fix. If you remember in 1992, when we went to elections, there were two key issues. One, okay, there were many issues, but the two key issues were, one, the human rights space, the democratic space, and number two was economic revival. I'll skip 1997 to 2002. 2002, again, we continued still with deepening human rights and democracy, and I think Wakili Okot here can even speak better on that. But there was also economic revival, still as a standing out issue. But when we went to 2007, the issue of economic revival was not on the table. What was now on the table was inclusivity and what I would call equity in resource distribution, meaning Kibaki managed to sort out the issue of our economic stagnation and challenges that Kenyans were facing, where the government could not provide services, even the basic ones. Remember, we reached a point where we were even paying school fees in primary schools. But Kibaki did away with that and took Kenya to another trajectory. But Kibaki now going to, that is now 2007, failed to appreciate that now the issue was not economic progress. The issue was now equity, and people are now talking about inclusivity, and that is what cost him presidency. I know people will argue that he won, but the jury is out there. Now, come to 2013, Uhuru came in. There were the issues of the Hague you can talk about, but what Kenyans wanted was economic inclusivity, what we were calling in BBI, that we wanted equity, the shared prosperity. That is what Kenyatta, Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga were dealing with in 2013. And after election, Uhuru left the line that Kenyans wanted him to take, and went the Kibaki line of even putting more resources, borrowing funds, and putting up infrastructure, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Now, come to where we are. Again, I will skip 2017. 2022. 2022.
Why are you skipping 2017, Mweshima? Is it because you guys were in...
No, because almost... no. I'm skipping 2017
yes.
Because the issues were
actually
basically...
from 2018.
Yeah, basically the issues were the same.
Yeah.
Okay.
The issues of 2013 carried forward to 2017, the issues of inclusivity. That's why I wanted to skip it. Okay. Now, come 2022, the issues were now different again. Kenyans were looking at the cost of living. When we went to the election, both political camps concentrated their energy and efforts on cost of living. What President Ruto, if I was an economic advisor, would have concentrated on were policies that would help alleviate or reduce the cost of living so that Kenyans would be satisfied with this presidency. Whatever he does, even if that is why you see Ruto is making very skewed appointments, but people are not talking much about them. But Kenyans are more concerned about food on the table. But do we have that as agenda of the current government? The answer is no. So what is the status of the state of the nation? Despair.
Okay.
Yes, morning, Trevor.
The scorecard is coming out, but I'm sure you disagree with it.
Thank you. First, let me say good morning to you, Trevor. And how have you been? It's been a long time.
Very long.
Since
you disappeared.
Since we've been here together.
Yes.
Let me also acknowledge and say hi to my good friends here, Dr. Okot, I remember how he excited all of us, you know, when he ran for president. He did well, hoping that he's still planning to run again in 2042.
Why would
Does he have your vote?
No, maybe.
No, I mean, because we have to make room for 2010.
No, by their measure, you know, constitutionally, this narrative that once person gets into the presidency, the assumption is that they have 10 years. The constitutional term limit is actually 5 years.
Well, that is presumptively correct based on the presumed performance of the person in office. And of course, my friend Mbadi has been one of the, you know, very distinguished leaders from his side of the coalition. Only that nowadays I've not been seeing him a lot on these platforms. He's gone a little quiet. Good to see you again, Buddy. And
thank you.
You said he flew very far to come to this show. And, you know, that's a remarkable effort. And I would want to draw our discussion to the analogy of the flight he took, because one of the things I would want to acknowledge, Trevor, is that indeed, if to answer that question, what is the state of the nation, where are we? It is acknowledged amongst all of us, including us serving within the ruling coalition, that the state of the nation is such that we are having a hard time for right now. Not ourselves, but the economic times are hard. And Kenyans are suffering. And there's something that needs to be done. That is acknowledged by all of us. The questions that I believe we should be asking pertinently and derive answers from is, number one, when you ask that question, what is the state of the nation? I think that would be premature to link it to, are we heading to the right direction? That's why I said I would want to draw on Mbadi's flight analogy, because I think we're asking that question at preparation and takeoff time. And in my view, it may be a little premature to ask when a flight is preparing. You have to fuel, you have to see you have everybody on board, that the engines are working, you know, you have your flight plan, everything, you know, and generally you're ready for takeoff and you start taking off. Because I believe that is where the government is right now. You know, it's takeoff time, just getting into the air. And so at that time, to be fair, if you asked and expected a conclusive answer, well, we know, as Dr. Okot has correctly said, that a president in office has a 5-year term. And so within the 8th month, would you judge fully whether you're in the right direction? Maybe that may be premature, but I can understand why that question is important now. It is important because we are facing very hard times, but also that when this government came to office, the expectations were very high, very, very high. Reason? Because the situation was actually even more dire at the time when we were going to the elections, and people voted and came out in large numbers because they wanted change. And they wanted to ensure that they get rid of what sufferings they had then and get into a new phase. The question I would be asking myself is the transition happening quickly enough? That would be the question. And because we are within that transition, Trevor, I think we need to acknowledge two things also. Number one, unless in a country you are in a situation where either you have a war or you have an earthquake, a major thing that just happens all of a sudden, that's when you would find circumstances you can deal with immediately. But we must acknowledge that once and when we find ourselves in this kind of situation, it is a culmination of things we have done wrongly for the long term. And whether we want to say we don't want to blame the previous government, the Uhuru government, or whatever. The fact and the reality is that for a country to find itself where we are right now with our economy, where the cost of living is rising constantly without stopping, where the cost of food on the table is impossible for families to meet. This is not just an act of an overnight happening. It is not just because Ruto was elected. This is because for a long time, there have been things that have been done wrongly. The question is, when President William Samoei Ruto and the current administration came into office, and I've heard that has been discussed not only this morning, but many times over, did he have a plan? Does that plan amount or equal to rescuing this country or giving us, the answers we seek? I believe expecting that that plan would be put on the table, interpreted, implemented, and results seen within the first 8 months of office, I think that would be expecting a miracle for that matter. It is possible, and I believe that that is going to happen.
Yeah.
And the transition that is required right now is first to change direction. And let me close by saying this on this particular point, that from my assessment, Trevor, and we've had this debate here for a long time, one of the things that we all acknowledge we did wrong is we presumed that continuing to fund our situation by continuing to incur debts, borrowed money from our local economy and foreign debt would alleviate our problems of the moment. And that got us to where we are right now. The direction that the president is taking is a completely opposite direction. After acknowledging, like he said, that you cannot continue to give a facade or untenable solutions to a problem that is going to be permanent. And so he's taken the opposite direction of firming up the foundation of our local basics in maintaining our economy. And that is why, at that time of farming that foundation, you find that there's bound to be this. What I would be urging, those that are with us in the administration. And let me acknowledge, because I also got elected the first time as a governor. I've been a senator for the other years. When you go and sit on the driver's seat, it is a completely different experience. Because that time, you're not talking about them, you're talking about you.
The reality strike.
The realities.
Trevor, listening to Governor, two things come to my mind very quickly. The hypocrisy in our political discourse. Senator Wamatangi here
is governor.
Governor Wamatangi. I still remember you as a senator. Maybe I'm still to settle the fact that you're a governor. But Governor Wamatangi was in the past administration. And they never spoke so eloquently the way they are speaking now in defense of the failings of this new administration. And Governor Wamatangi at that time was actually supposed to be looking after devolution and how things were beginning to go wrong. They never debated about that. So this is the hypocrisy I see in our politics. So that today, they are busy trying to defend this administration as if it's a newcomer. I also hear Governor here taking us back to election time. Governor, election came and went. What you are describing is the state of the nation at that time when we are giving promises and all that, But to use the analogy that this plane is about to take off, no. This plane has already taken off. It is in the skies. It says, I'm going to land into the city of Nairobi, JKIA, by due time. And it is them who actually came up with the timelines. In 6 months, I'll do this. In 100 days, I'll do this. By January, the cost of this will not go up. And that confirms one thing. For some of us who supported, voted for this administration, to be honest, perhaps we could now admit that maybe it was naivety on our part to believe that that these people, not being newcomers in government. Gachagua was a DO, so he knows the workings of government. He was a member of parliament. William Ruto has been a minister. He's been a deputy president of this country for 10 years. And let's not run away from that. That's a fact. You cannot now say, even by the way, Makanga, the ordinary Makanga here, is a co-driver. In a matatu. When the driver, he'll move the matatu, he'll say, we use this route, we use that route. So let's not excuse President William Ruto's administration, especially now that it's clear he's actually shifting goalposts. What, Governor, I will suggest to President William Ruto is this. You know, some of us who are students of constitutional administrative law, there are two principles. There is what we call mandatory and explanatory accountability. You can take a decision without necessarily consulting, but you can now explain why you took that decision. That is called explanatory accountability. But you can also make a mistake, but you amend it by correcting. Hence, a mandatory accountability. So, what I think the president, in my view, needs to do, and we all want a government that succeeds, because it's our government. It's not Ruto's government. Administration is, but the government is ours. I think we want the government to succeed, but at least explain to us the steps that you are taking. And I still want to say this, family, let's stop blaming Uhuru administration. Uhuru is no longer the president of the Republic of Kenya. Okay. You know, let's also not stop blaming the handshake, because I hear also a lot of, it's the handshake government, the handshake this. Now you're in charge. Now show us where you want to take this country, come up with policies, and we'll discuss. For example, does it make sense, to keep on saying, to introduce fuel levy, excise duty on some of these things that actually drive the cost of living up? I mean, these are some of the things that we should really be discussing instead of this blame game. Okay.
And buddy, you have vast knowledge in accounts. Before I take a quick break, and Uhuru is saying that we need a direction. And the president has tabled a finance bill, and in fact, now it's in public domain to discuss. Where would you start? What would you recommend?
Actually, you just picked what I wanted to talk about when Governor Matangi said that there is a plan, that they are at the preparatory stage, that the plane is just about to take off. But the question you want to ask, what is the signal? What is the picture? What is there to give us confidence when government policies speak the opposite? And the policy here, you've mentioned one, which is very key, the finance bill. Now, if the problem that Kenyans are facing today is truly the high cost of living, which they expect the head of state and the entire government to deal with, then we expect the finance bill to speak to that. Now, what is our finance bill speaking to? One, on the cost of living. There are amendments, a number of amendments proposed on the VAT Act. And that you look at the second schedule, you find a number of commodities, which are the basic necessities. Some are being removed from zero rating to exempt, simply because the government does not want to make tax refunds. When a commodity is removed from zero rating to exempt, it becomes more expensive. Yes. And what are these items? One of them is pharmaceutical products. Another one is fertilizer. Another one is pest control products. Another one is sugarcane transportation from the farms to the milling corporation. You are making our sugar production more expensive than it is, and we have been complaining that the reason why our sugar is not as competitive as the rest in the region is because we are producing expensively. Now you are making it more expensive. Maize flour, cassava flour, basic things are being removed from zero rating to exempt, meaning you are making the prices more expensive. I will take you further to the amendment on turnover tax. Turnover tax used not to be there. And turnover tax is very simple. It's tax on sales, whether you make profit or not. And the mamambogas, the Juakali people. And it is pegged now, as we speak, at 1 million. Any sales below 1 million, you don't pay turnover tax. Now, what Kenya Kwanza is doing is to reduce that to 500,000 per year, which if you divide by 365 days is 1,370 shillings. So Mama Mboga in Korogocho, Madare Estate, whose sales per day is 1,370, is supposed to shed off 3% of that to the government in terms of tax. Even the rate has been increased from 1 to 3%. Our youth who are involved in the digital space, most of them are unemployed. And because they are creative enough, now they have been involved in the digital space and making a living. What do? You introduce, through Clause 2 to the finance bill, you introduce what they call digital content monetization. a 15% withholding tax, discouraging the very, very youth from being innovative, and it flies in the face of the government talking about investing in internet connectivity and generally the digital economy. So what are you doing? You know, the question that I have for Ruto's government is any government, Trevor, and I hope you'll indulge me for just 2 minutes on this, any country in the world, there is clear separation of policies among or between political parties. If you go to the UK, you will find the Tories are more leaning towards supporting the rich. The Labour is more on the ordinary Labour people. The same with the US, the Democrats and the Republicans. Here in Kenya, I know we have had very little separation in our policies. But the question I would want to ask Ruto, who are you targeting? Because you seem to be hurting everybody. We would be happy if Ruto was hurting the rich and the poor are smiling. But Ruto is going for the rich, those who are earning super salary of 500,000 and above, who we should motivate to create more local demand, because global demand is shrinking. World over, people are encouraging the locals to buy more goods and services because the global demand is shrinking. That is why during COVID, we reduced the tax rates so that people can have more money in their pockets. What Ruto government wants to do is to take money from people's pockets and give to the government to finance extravagance. And I call it extravagance because who forced William Ruto with this state of economy to employ 50 CASs? Uhuru Kenyatta had about just 20-something. I think there were 23. PSS are now 51. They were much less in Uhuru's government. Who has forced him to employ all these people? Wastages. We are seeing wastages at a time when they are the same one who are talking loudly that our economy is in bad state. My concluding remark is this. You see, Trevor, the truth is that we are borrowing. Let no one cheat Kenya. In fact, this is another lie that the Kenya Kwanza is again repeating to Kenyans. And they are soon succeeding. They have convinced my governor here that we are borrowing less. Governor, it is not true. And I would tell you from the point of National Assembly, someone who has been involved in budget-making process, it is not true. We are borrowing the same way we were borrowing during Kenyatta's regime. So let nobody lie to anyone that this government is now stopping borrowing. That is not correct. So what I want to leave it at the point where I would ask, when Kibaki came into power in 2002, immediately there was free primary education. Yeah. Immediately. So you cannot tell us that within a few 8 months, what is it that Ruto has done in 8 months? Hustler fund? Okay. What is it? Right. Can you just tell us concretely?
I'll take a quick commercial break. Matangi, I'll come with you. Let's take a quick commercial break. I'll come back and write a response because I know there's a lot that has been said. You can see also your feedback at Trevor Mbiji at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Daybreak. There's also quite a number of issues we'll talk about. There's corruption everywhere. Corruption in the KEBS, KRA, Ministry of Health. We'll talk about that in just a bit. We've seen a bit of reshuffle. Some people suspended and boards disbanded. That coming up in just a bit.
That's treating symptoms.